Mr. Chair, I would like to welcome Mr. Kyle Gustafson, and he will be reviewing Article 1 of the policy bill, which is our property tax article.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Welcome, Mr. Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair,
If you could introduce yourself. Thanks.
Mr. Chair members, my name is Kyle Gustafson. I'm a staff attorney with the Department of Revenue, and I'll be walking through Article 1 of House File 3411, the department's policy bill, and this article deals with property tax. Section 1 specifies that the Commissioner of Transportation will certify aid amounts for the Small Cities Assistance Program to the Commissioner of Revenue by June 1st. This is the current practice between the two agencies, and it's just putting in that date into statute. Section 2 specifies that the Department of Revenue will make recommendations to the Board of Assessors for sanctions recommendations, and also clarifies the notice and hearing procedures for a licensee to seek review of a recommendation at the Office of Administrative Hearings. This just puts in some additional clarification of the procedures for seeking review. Section 3 changes the threshold amount for filing a certificate of real estate value for real estate transactions.
Can you speak into the mic a little better, Mr. Gustafson? We can't hear you very well. Thank you.
Section 3, again, this increases the threshold amount for a real estate transaction, so that threshold amount that is required for, or that triggers the requirement for filing an ECRV goes from $1,000 to $3,000. And Section 4 increases the consideration for real property transactions to which the minimum deed tax applies, and increases that amount from $500 to $3,000. So that minimum deed tax amount matches with the CRV threshold amount, and this is something that we've worked with the counties to reach that $3,000 figure. It's a figure that works for the department and works for the counties, and allows the counties, when calculating the deed tax, to be able to check the CRV system. And that concludes Article 1.
Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Cummings, is that a tax cut then?
It is negligible, but this would be a tax.
Coming from the department?
Mr. Chair, if you look at the governor's tax bill, there are many tax reductions. But
I'm going to dig in there again, Mr. Cummings.
but if in terms of
You're under oath, sir.
this is scored as negligible from our tax research division, and it would be negligible towards the taxpayer, if I'm thinking about this correctly.
Thank you. Did you have other comments on Mr. Cummings on this?
I just wanted to note, Mr. Chair, on Section 2, this was placed in our policy bill at the request of the State Board of Assessors. We, I mean, obviously, because it is in the department's technical bill, it is something that we agree with, but this was something that we had been asked for by them rather than sort of brought forward by the department for the Board of Assessors. So,
Thank you. Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Ms. Scho was trying to show me where that might be in the language, but for clarification, Mr. Cummins, transactions that are internal are often say no consideration, $500 or less, you pay $1.65 per 500. That would be the deed tax you pay. Are you saying then that it'll be $1.65 for the first $3,000, or are we still doing $3.30 $1,000 and it'll still be $10 that's collected?
Mr. Cummings, or Mr. Gustafson?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hertaus, that $1.65 would apply to all transactions under $3,000, and so then anything that's over $3,000, it would be calculated as it currently is. So anything, it starts at $9.90 at that point.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for that clarification. And you could probably raise the limit to $10,000 or $20,000 because there's not too much real estate that changes hands for such a small amount of money.
Thank you. Other questions, members? I think we may have some people who like to testify as well. Who would like to testify? Anybody like to testify on this bill?
Mr. Chair, we have one more section, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
In Article 2.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Article 2, Sections 4 and 5.
Ms. Berry will be joining me to
Wel-
go over this.
Welcome, Ms. Berry. How are you today?
Mr. Chair, I'm feeling great.
Great, welcome.
So I'll be going over sections 4 and 5 of Article 2. for the
And Ms.
local-
Berry, we're anticipating tax cuts here, too. Just kidding, Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sections 4 and 5, local lodging tax. We have over 100 local lodging taxes.
Ms. Berry, did you introduce yourself? I'm sorry.
Yes, for the record, my name is Susan Berry with the Department of Revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have over 100 local lodging taxes within the state of Minnesota, 4 of which are administered by the Department of Revenue, and sections 4 and 5 cover all local lodging taxes. Section 4 provides that the local lodging taxes due on the entire consideration paid for access to the lodging, including ancillary or related services such as the services of accommodations intermediaries as defined in general sales tax law. Section 5 provides that in collecting the local lodging tax, for those local governments that do not have the Department of Revenue administer the tax, the local ordinance may require annual remittance and filing of the lodging taxes by the accommodations intermediaries. And if the ordinance does so, then the due date of the tax and the return is October 20th each year. The local governments must inform the accommodations intermediaries of the due date and also provide them electronically with the geographic and zip code information necessary to apply the tax. And that ends that article.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Mr. Cummings.
Mr. Chair, just to sort of expand upon what Ms. Berry said, accommodations intermediaries are online lodging and travel providers who resell rooms. So this proposal makes it clear that the lodging tax does apply to the sales price of lodging as paid by the consumer, including the elements that go into that sales price, regardless if it was sold by the hotel or an accommodations intermediary. For instance, if you bought a book from a store, and the store argued that the sales price for the purposes of some of the sales tax should be the wholesale price paid by the retailer and not the retail sales price paid by the consumer, it would be really inconsistent with how we treat sales price. We can't say that the wholesale sales price is the price and then the cost of restocking and selling the book at the retail store is a service that is different than the sales price as a service. Consumers see one price, which is the sales price, and that is where the tax should be levied. So whatever makes up that price that consumers pay, whether the wholesale price of the room or an accommodations intermediary fee, it should be subject to the tax. If this committee wants to think about tax rates or the amount of tax levied, then that's a different discussion than ensuring we have consistent tax basis. In determining whether to apply the tax to the local, the lodging-related services, it should not matter who administers the lodging tax, the local government or the Department of Revenue. Right now, if it's administered by a local unit of government, then that part of the sales price, the accommodations intermediary part, is not subject to this tax. But if it is administered by the Department of Revenue, that part of sales price is. Nor should it matter whether the lodging tax is authorized under general law or special law, which it is right now. It is important that taxes, when authorized, are generally applied fairly and consistently across the state. Now, even if we're talking about the same hotel, Mr. Chair, same room, same price of the room, if you go to that hotel's website or call them on the phone, that hotel, if they have a local lodging tax, then you need to pay the tax, the lodging tax, on the whole price of the room. If you call them, if you walk in, if you go to their website. But if you go to a travel website, then you don't pay one of these online accommodations intermediaries. Then you're paying the local lodging tax only based on the price that they have charged with the accommodations intermediary is charged from the hotelier. That is a price that the consumer does not see. So even if you're going online to check the various prices of websites, you don't know why that number is lower than the other. But it could be that the number at the online travel website is lower simply because there is a difference in tax base that is because of a small issue within the law. So that's what we're trying to bring up, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Questions, members? Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Cummins, if I take my grandson to the Wolf Lodge in Bloomington, and I stay there,
Right.
and it's very expensive, believe me, so I've not stayed there, but he loves the water park.
Right.
So we have to pay a fee to use the water park if you're not staying there, and of course, I think it's built in if you stay there. So would this be considered ancillary, and the lodging tax would apply then, in addition?
Mr. Cummings?
Do you know?
Mr. Chair, I believe that, I don't know how the Great Wolf Lodge puts together their pricing, but if it is a service that is not connected to lodging, if you're not staying there and you're going there just for the water park, then that would not be a lodging-related service, so therefore it would be not taxable.
Okay.
Yet if you did get to go to the water park as part of the price that
Right.
you pay to go to a room, we believe that that would be a lodging or related service.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cummins, if I ever
Representative
do
Erickson.
stay there, I'll let you know. Thank you.
So Representative Erickson, cash will only have to bring his cash.
That's right. Oh, he loves that name, by the way. He sees cash all over the place.
Thank you. Other questions, members? We have some additional testifiers. Thank you, Ms. Berry. Please introduce yourself for the record, sir, and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Shane Rudlang, and I represent the Bloomington Port Authority. I'm here to talk about the local lodging tax issue that was outlined by the Department of Revenue. As was mentioned, local lodging taxes are in place in a number of metros and outstate jurisdictions. Simply put, the current statute has an oddity in it in which the tax base for sales tax is not the same tax base for local lodging tax, and it matters how you pay. Lodging taxes are paid varies by how the customer pays for the hotel room. For example, if a person is booking a hotel room and the price they see is $100, the sales tax, nobody's arguing, is on $100. But the local lodging tax might be on a figure like $80. We call that the wholesale price of the room, where $20 is kept by Expedia. If you book a room on Marriott.com, you'll be paying lodging and sales tax on $100. If you book a room on Expedia.com and click Pay Now, you'll be paying lodging tax on $80. That's an oddity. This results in slightly lower tax revenue and an overall reduction in the room amount sometimes, but it's inconsistent. I've polled a lot of websites. What lodging tax is paid should not vary depending on how you book a room. This is messy tax policy and should be corrected. The current law has the effect of putting local Minnesota businesses at a slight disadvantage compared to these out-of-state online booking websites. Minnesota hoteliers support the law. One is with me today. You may hear from the opposition that it's too complicated to administer or that it may impact wedding planners. Certainly that's not the intent of the law, nor do we believe that it is complicated to administer or that it affects wedding planners. In fact, in 2011, when the law was modified, the Department of Revenue opined that it did not apply to those types of servicers. This tax oddity has been corrected in many jurisdictions in the U.S., and it's time for Minnesota to do that now. House File 427 and Senate File 586 were introduced in 2017. The Senate bill was included in the omnibus tax bill. It's been part of the Department of Revenue's policy suggestions for many years. I'd like to also highlight that this has no impact on state funds, and also the League of Minnesota Cities, Barry Carlson, mentioned to me on the way out of the door that they support the bill. He had to go to another hearing. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rudling. Any questions for Mr. Rudling? Okay, welcome, sir.
Thank you,
Please,
Mr. Chair.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Jim Sackerman. I'm the general manager at the Embassy Suites. I used to manage the water park, by the way. And I'm also the active chair for the Bloomington Convention and Visitors Bureau. I'm probably going to repeat some of what Shane has talked about, but online travel agents, companies like Expedia have been around for more than 20 years. They have found their place in our industry, there's no doubt about that. They're a very good marketing tool for many hotels. They're more expensive than a traditional travel agent, but they have the traffic to back it up. From the beginning, the online travel company, their goal was to offer a lower rate. Lower rates, more traffic to the website. This is how they became so popular so quickly. Not many years ago, like Shane said, you could find a better rate on a third-party website than you could find on our own brand.com, in my case, Hilton.com. In recent years, hotel brands unified and their pricing with OTCs and created rate parity. So the same price is guaranteed on our website as you can find anywhere else. In fact, many big brands have that guarantee. If you can find a lower rate, we'll pay you back the difference. Because of tax laws, now that we have rate parity, the rates are all the same, tax laws come into play, and I think OTCs have used them to manipulate the pricing that they offer to the consumer. Not only are they paying less tax, but that difference is being used to offer a slightly lower price to the consumer in some cases, and then that underpayment of taxes is also being pocketed by the OTCs. When the consumer shops for a hotel, they typically see the same exact price as the hotel is offering. However, the final price, including taxes and fees, is often lower than the advertised price. If you take the transaction all the way through to the end and you see the price with taxes, you'll see a variance. Sometimes it's very small, but it'll be lower by 70 cents or some amount of money that makes it different than what you could buy that same room with tax directly from us, directly from the hotels. Sites like Expedia have used this wiggle room, it's really, it's not right. It's not fair. It kind of goes against why we had rate parity in the first place. There's no longer rate parity, but there is tax disparity. And they're using this discrepancy to, like I said, to provide a small savings to the guests and increase their profit. This puts us at a disadvantage, clearly, as a business. We want all the traffic to come to our website, and we want to charge the guest the price that we advertised along with the applicable taxes. And as far as underpaying the tax, it may seem like a small amount for one room, but if you add them all up over the course of 1 year, it can be a six-figure number in the amount of local tax that's undercollected because of that Expedia, and I use Expedia a lot when I mean most of the online travel companies, when you compare them back and forth. Conservatively, I think Bloomington last year ran over 2.6 million occupied rooms, and more than 10% of that comes from online travel companies. And if they're paying a couple of bucks less per room over the course of 1 year at 2.6 million occupied rooms, that can easily be $250,000 to $500,000. And that's the end of my testimony. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Suckerman. Any questions for Mr. Suckerman? Okay. Anyone else who would like to testify on this bill? Okay. Hearing none. Mr. Cummings, any closing comments for Representative David Zabel?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you to Representative Davids for being a great bill author. And again, the two things that I guess I'd like to stress is that I wanted to thank our attorneys, many of the partners that we've worked with, our researchers and other people within our divisions who've worked very hard to try and uncover issues and bring them before the legislature. And I also wanted to just, if there are issues that arise here, we'd be open to partnering with you and trying to look more into them and to come to a resolution that works in the best interest of all Minnesotans.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cummings.